right, so we are toward the end of a, for us, very long mimer that's taken us quite a number of times, but we are actually going to finish it today. What were we up to? What we developed in this mimer, let's sort of go back to the beginning to understand, because today's going to be the end, so we see how it all ties in together. We opened up this mimer looking at these enormous brachos that we're told we are getting through the inheritance of Yaakov, a nachala b'li netzarim, a limitless inheritance, as the pasuk says, "Ufaratzta yama v'kedma tzafona v'negba." You're going to burst forth in all directions limitlessly, and we're told this is in the zchus of Yaakov. Yaakov's nachala b'li netzarim, Yaakov's limitless inheritance. And we say, what about Avram and Yitzchak? You know, they're not chopped liver. Why is it Yaakov? I mean, nothing against Yaakov. It should be all three. Why is it Yaakov? Oh, well, Yaakov is something special. We see about Yaakov that he kept Shabbos. And in the merit of keeping Shabbos, there is this limitless inheritance. The question is, well, we're probably sure that Avram and Yitzchak also kept Shabbos. Maybe you don't see anything explicit about Yitzchak, so we know he kept Shabbos because all of us kept all the time. But okay, but Avram, it says clearly when it says on the pasuk Lishma Mishmarti that he kept all the mitzvahs. He also kept Shabbos. He kept the mitzvahs of Shabbos. So if it's keeping Shabbos, that's the zechus of that forefather to draw down to us this limitless inheritance. We also see in the pasuk a reference to Avram keeping Shabbos, meaning we don't see explicit in a verse Yaakov kept Shabbos or Avram kept Shabbos. In two different psukim, we have allusions, one teaching us how Avram kept Shabbos, one teaching us how Yaakov kept Shabbos. So what's Yaakov's superiority to Abraham? So that was one question. And in a sense, you might say bigger question, I don't know what we're going to call the bigger question, is why is it anyway that Shabbos creates this limitless inheritance? It's almost sort of counterintuitive, because Shabbos seemingly is something limited. It's not whenever, whoever, whatever. It's a certain period of time that's very limited. And it's coming from 6 days of time before that. 6 days of time creates a day of time called Shabbos. So seemingly, it's an example of a limited, very time-bound mitzvah. You can't do a Shabbos on a Tuesday, no matter how inspired you are. It's a very time-bound, limited mitzvah. So why would this time-bound, limited mitzvah, why would the reward be limitless? Because things are like Mida Keneged Mida, how we operate, that's the response. So why would a mitzvah that it innately, in her essence, in her being, is limit, create as a reward limitlessness? So those were the two questions we started the Maimon with. And then we went into the idea of Shabbos. Obviously, this has to do with Shabbos. And we went into this field of Mincha Shabbos. And we analyzed we analyzed that addition to Shemona Esrei, which is unique to Mincha Shabbos. Why are we looking specifically at Mincha Shabbos? Because we know Mincha is the culmination of the day. So the tefillah of Mincha is going to be the culmination of this energy of Shabbos. So what do we see in the culmination? Well, we see 4 levels of Chesed Gevur Tiferes. Chesed Gevur Tiferes as it's invested in Netzach Yisod of Atzilus. Higher than that, Chesed Gevur Tiferes of Atzilus. Higher than that, Chesed Gevur Tiferes after the Tzimtzum Harishon, all the way from Adam Kadmon through Keser Atzilus, and higher than that, Chesed Gevur Tiferes before Tzimtzum Harishon, which is an insanely high level because we're talking about Kodim and Tzimtzum. We're talking about Hashem, we shouldn't be talking about levels, but the Rebbe proved at length in this long mimer, so it was very interesting proof how Chesed and Gevur and Tiferes all exist Kodim and Tzimtzum. And after we went through all that with a lot of detail, the Rebbe says, and the Jew draws all that energy down to himself. And then continuing in this Hoysafa for Shabbos Mincha, after we went through all of them, there's an extra phrase that's not part of these nice, neat trios. After those 4 trios, we have another phrase, like the addendum, Menucha Shlema Sha'ata Roitzeba. And then the Rebbe unpacks that at length, extensively, showing us that this is referring to an even higher level than Chesed Gevur Tiferes Kodim and Tzimtzum, because this is She'ata, and Shin has 3 lines, but it's all in one letter, so it's 3 lines, not yet expressed as 3 different powers. So what is this? This is the potential of Chesed Gevur Tiferes that has not yet emerged as Chesed Gevur Tiferes, So that's even higher than Chesed Gvura Tiferes Kaidim Atzimtzum. And then Ata, you, is Chesed, and it's She'ata, so it's one word. So it's this complete fusion of the Shin before even Chesed Gvura Tiferes Kaidim Atzimtzum to the Ata, which is Chesed already overt after the Tzimtzum. And what is this level that's She'ata, Mnucha Shalema, She'ata, right, Seba? This is the Pshitas of the Ein Sof. This is such a high level, even higher than everything we said before about those 4 levels of Chesed Gvura Tiferes. And then the Rebbe says, and the Jew draws us down as well. We're like, whoa, who are we that we could draw down these insane, enormous powers? So the Rebbe explains, because you have inside of you the Pshitas of the Yechida. Every Jew has levels in soul. There's Pnimi levels of soul. There's the Makif levels of soul, which we also discussed at length in the Yitzhak Maimer this year. And within the Makif, there's Makif HaKarav level of soul, and there's Makif HaRachok level of soul, as we discussed in the Maimer of Yitzhak this year. And then there's the Yechida, which is higher than all of that. It's not Pnimi, it's not Makif HaKarav, it's not Makif HaRachok, it's not levels, it's Pshitas. And the Pshitas, the simplicity of the Yechida, evokes and can draw down the Pshitas of the Ein Sof. And that's how all these very, very, very high levels that we're discussing in the Tefillah of Mincha, Shabbos, we draw down. We draw down. We draw it all down. Chesed Gvura Tiferes all the way to Kaidim Atzimtzum, and then even higher than that. And Pshitas Ein Sof, we draw it all down because we have inside of us such a core Pshitas as well. The Pshitas of the soul of the Jew. And Rebbe said similarly, just as the Jew has this power as like core of our soul, and again we said that in other places, like in Toldos and Beis, Rebbe says clearly Yechid is not core, but we don't have a name for core, so we're calling Pshitas of Yechid is like that plus everything even more deep. So in essence, core of our soul. We also see this in a halacha. There's a halacha that expresses this Pshitas, and that halacha is the idea of Dalit Amos, that a person possesses 4 amos. 4 amos was like roughly 6 feet. Today we call it 6 feet. This is the extension of the person, like we see in the laws of Shabbos, that if a person is going outside the area, he has this extra 4 amos. Well, what if you're shorter? What if you're taller? What if you're fatter? What if you're thinner? It doesn't make a difference. We all have the same 4 amos, the same dollar amos, no matter what your personal dimensions are, because it's a concept of pshitos. Pshitos means it's pashut, it's simple, it's non-divisional, it's non-compartmentalized. It doesn't break itself down into parts. It doesn't make itself different as per anything. It's beyond anything. It's remote from anything. It's pshitos. And therefore, the Yid, possessing this pshitos of the Yechida, drawing down the pshitos of the Ein Sof, has this enormous ability from the very pshitos of our soul to be Meiser Nefesh Hashem, to Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. And they're explained very beautifully, as we discussed last week, that term, as we also have in the Tefillah of Mincha, that we're bringing Kedusha into the Shem of Hashem. That when we self-sacrifice and we're Meiser Nefesh and we're Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, it means we sanctify, we bring sanctity into Hashem's name. That's the power of who? Of a Jew, of any Jew, of every Jew. Well, shouldn't it be more the power of a more learned Jew, or more the power of a more righteous Jew, or more the power of a more spiritual Jew? No, because it comes from the Pshitas of the Yechida. And the Pshitas of the Yechida is not relating to if I'm more righteous or more spiritual or more learned. It's got nothing to do with that. It's Pshitas. You're a Jew. So every Jew has the exact same ability to be Meiser Nefesh. And every Jew has the exact same ability to Mekadesh Shem Shemayim, to draw Kedusha into the Shem Shemayim. And every Jew has the exact same ability to draw down the Pshitas of the Ein Sof. And then the Rebbe said, the same way we have this Pshitas in our soul, the same way there's this Pshitas in the Ein Sof, the same way there's this Pshitas in Halach of Dalat Amos, there's one mitzvah that embodies Pshitas. And the mitzvah that embodies Pshitas is Shabbos. So Pshitas of the Ein Sof, Pshitas of the soul, Yechida, Pshitas of a Halacha, Dalat Amos, and Pshitas of a mitzvah, Shabbos. And Shabbos also is this concept of pshitas, that as the Rebbe discussed, that other mitzvahs, all other mitzvahs, depending on who you are, it's how you do them. Obviously, we all do the mitzvahs, but you can't compare a regular Jew putting on tefillin and a tzaddik putting on tefillin, or a regular Jew making a bracha and a tzaddik making a bracha. Obviously, the regular Jew is doing what he's supposed to do, and Hashem is very appreciative. But a tzaddik is investing so much spirituality and intention and love and fear. It makes a whole different mitzvah for every mitzvah but Shabbos. Because Shabbos also has this quality of pshitos. And therefore, the Rebbe said Even though, of course, also within the mitzvahs of Shabbos, a tzaddik is going to do it different than a simple Jew, but it does make a difference. In the end of the day, it's the same thing. Like the Rebbe said, we're resting on Shabbos. For a tzaddik, resting on Shabbos from the 6 days of avodas habirurin to the spiritual rest, liyachid yichudim. I mean, we don't even know what we're talking about. We can say the words. Who knows what we're saying? That's a tzaddik's resting on Shabbos. And for us, resting on Shabbos means we work really hard and we're finally getting a good night's sleep, and the phone's not going to bother us, and there's no computer that we can go work on, and we can't do our laundry anyway, and we can barely wash our dishes. We're going to get a good night's sleep. We don't have to get up to get the kids off to school, to get ourselves off to work. We're going to get a good night's sleep. We have menucha on Shabbos. Now, my menucha on Shabbos and tzaddik menucha on Shabbos looks very different, but we both have menucha on Shabbos. But there was a similar tainug on Shabbos. For a simple dude, tainug on Shabbos is he eats good food. A tzaddik tainug on Shabbos is not the flesh or the chocolate or the cake. A tzaddik's tainug on Shabbos is the spirituality of Shabbos. But at the end of the day, there's pshitus here. He has his tainug on Shabbos. I have my tainug on Shabbos. We all have the same concept of tainug on Shabbos because there's a pshitus to Shabbos. So now we see, so the Rebbe developed for us, there's a pshitus of the Ein Sof, drawn down by the pshitus of the Yechid of my soul, expressed in the halacha of Dalet Amos, expressed in the mitzvah of Shabbos, which is why the halacha of Dalet Amos very specifically has this very strong Shabbos relevance with Tchum Shabbos. And with all that, we can now continue. That was an overview, and continue and conclude this very powerful mimer. So the Rebbe said, based on all of this, we understand why on Shabbos we can say Ata Echa V'Shem Cha'echa V'Cham Yisrael V'Echa V'Eretz V'Eretz Gedula Teres Yeshua. That whole tefillah insert of mincha, meaning we're discussing there Chesed Gevur Teferes on all these levels till Kaidem Tzitz Marishon. We're discussing Menucha Shlema She'ata Roitze Ba Pshitus of Ein Sof. We're saying we're drawing it down. You know why we can say all this? Because it's Shabbos. Meaning, on a weekday, we wouldn't be able to say this. Well, I have the Pshitus of the Yechid of my Neshama that draws down the Pshitus of the Ein Sof. Yeah, but it's not as revealed and accessible inside of you. Like, probably, for most of us. But on Shabbos it is. Because in other words, on Shabbos we have this amazing combination or dynamic duo of your soul power, within which is Pshitus of Yechida, and the day itself, the mitzvah you're immersed in, the mitzvah of Shabbos, which is the mitzvah of Pshitus. So on Shabbos, a time of Pshitus, a mitzvah of Pshitus, the Pshitus of the neshama of the Jew is most intense and shining. And then at that moment, every single Jew can draw down the Pshitus of the Ein Sof. And therefore, all these 4 levels of Chesed Gevur Tiferes come down to your soul. And the higher beyond Chesed Gevur Tiferes Kaidem Tzimtzum also come down to your soul. Pshitus of the Ein Sof come down to your soul. The Pshitus of your neshama is drawing it down within the beautiful setting that's allowing this jewel to shine, the beautiful setting of the Pshitus of Shabbos. So that's how it all ties together. The Rebbe says, we're talking about something coming down, hishtalshalus, evolution, coming down. We have generally 2 ways, 2 options. When something is descending, it could be a yesh me'ayin or a yesh me'yesh, meaning we have the term yesh, existence. We have the term ayin, like godly nothingness. Generally, when we think of creation, we think of creation as yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. The nothing meaning this exalted nothingness of God. So from that ayin emerges a yesh, a substance, a thing. It's more limited and more tangible, even though, of course, spirituality is not tangible, but relative to ayin, more tangible. That's the process of creation, which we have yesh me'ayins, ilav alus, descent. Then we have something called yesh me'yesh. You take something, you make another something from it. Now, it's very interesting what the Rebbe is doing here, because usually yesh me'yesh would mean like you have a lump of silver and you fashion it into a bowl. That's yesh me'yesh. But yesh me'ayin is creation, right? So we think of in Chassidus, oh, well, yesh me'ayin constantly needs Hashem's, giving it another push, another burst of energy to exist because it's yesh me'ayin. In essence, it's non-substance that's being formed into substance and then would revert, but then would again, and then it would revert and again. So all of creation is yesh me'ayin. But within creation itself, within Olam Hazeh Hagashmi, within planet Earth, we have a lot of yesh me'yesh, because everything in our physical reality is yesh me'yesh. So this bookmark came from a piece of leather that then got fashioned into a bookmark instead of into a belt or into a pocketbook or into shoes or into a jacket. It got fashioned into a bookmark. So this is yesh me'yesh. It comes from leather, and of course the leather comes from an animal, and all yesh me'yesh, yesh me'yesh, yesh me'yesh. So normally, if anyone ever uses the terms yesh me'yesh or yesh me'ayin, creation, existence, God's creation is yesh me'ayin, something from nothing, nothing meaning this exalted level of godliness, and yesh me'yesh is what's happening in this world reality. The Rebbe here is doing something very deep, and I never saw it before, very profound, the point the Rebbe is going to make here. So the Rebbe says, when we're talking about an ayin from which emerges a yesh, there's a limitation to how low that yesh can go. Because since it's coming from an ayin, from this absolute bittul nothingness of God, how low can it go? We're talking about a yesh, a substance, like, the leather that became this bookmark. Well, it's a yesh. It could go straight into another yesh. So it could go all the way down because it's a yesh in the first place. So what do we mean by like yesh me'ayin has this limit? So this is like, for example, it says hachachma me'ayin timatzeh. Chachma vatzilus, primordial wisdom in the world of being, the highest level, the highest world, chachma vatzilus, me'ayin timatzeh, which Chassidus explains, chachma comes from ayin. What's ayin? Ayin is we take the me'ayin 101, and this is keser of atzilus. So from keser of atzilus, from that level of ayin, of like godly nothingness, so to speak, comes a substance, a yesh, called chachma vatzilus. And within chachma vatzilus itself, really, chachma vatzilus subdivides, as you probably remember learning, the idea of chachma is koyach ma. You take the word chachma, we split it into two, it becomes two little words. One 4-letter word, chachma, becomes two 2-letter words, koyach ma. The power that you say on it, what was that? So koyach and ma are going in very different directions. Ma is, again, it's nebulous, it's amorphous, it's such godly energy, you can't chop it. And koyach, a power, a force, means something more substantial. So koyach ma, right? There's this koyach that I could question, what is that ma? And Chassidus speaks about this. The Rashab, conscious mind, explains how ma is like that movement of chachma ascending above, ascending to keser and beyond, and koyach is the descent of chachma to feed the lower realms, to feed bina, etc. So within chachma we have the ma of chachma, the higher element, and we have the koyach of chachma, the lower element. Ha-chachma me'ayin timatzeh. Chachma comes from me'ayin. Me'ayin is a miracle value of 101, which is a reference to keser of atzilus. So from keser of atzilus, the ayin, the nothingness, the such godliness, we can't describe it as anything, emerges a yesh called chachma. Now, chachma is a very refined yesh. Not only that, but we're told keser doesn't go into the whole chachma. Keser only goes into the ma of chachma. Meaning, as I'm saying, chachma has two elements, the ma and the koyach. The ma which goes up, the koyach which goes down. The ma is the upper dimension, the koyach is the lower dimension. So, ha-chachma me'ayin timatzeh, chachma is found in me'ayin, meaning, I sort of went quickly here, chachma me'ayin timatzeh simply means, where can you find wisdom? But Chassidus explains that this is talking about chachma vatzilus, and we read it not as a question, but as a statement. Chachma me'ayin timatzeh. Chachma is found in me'ayin. And again, me'ayin is the numerical value of 101, which is keser atzilus. So from the ayin, from the nothingness meaning, again, nothing in our world means nothing. But our world is the reverse of reality. So in our world, things have substance, and ayin is nothingness. We're a something that came from a nothing. Like, someone whose parents were paupers, but he made it, American dream. He's a something from a nothing. But that's the opposite of the reality. The reality is the original state of nothingness was far, far higher godliness than what emerged and became the something of creation. So hachachma me ayin timatze, chachma emerging from ayin, from keser vatzilos, is from ayin keser to a yesh chachma, but a very, very, very refined yesh. Such a refined yesh that it's ma of chachma of atzilus. So what happened to kayach of chachma of atzilus? What happens to bina of atzilus? What happens to chachma of bria? Keser cannot go that low. Keser is ayin. From an ayin to a yesh, it can only be a very refined yesh. So keser of atzilus could descend to ma of chachma of atzilus, but don't try lower. No, it can't go lower. So the Rebbe went into this example to prove the point he's trying to make, that when you have a movement from ayin to yesh, it doesn't go that far down. Because it can't, because it's ayin. It's so godly. How could it go far down? When we have yesh me yesh, well, it's already a yesh, so it could go directly into a yesh. No issue. Like I said, this started off as a piece of leather. Now it became a bookmark or a pocketbook or a pair of shoes or a belt or a jacket. From one substance, it became another substance. Low. No issues. Now the Rebbe comes to this point here. Brilliant chiddush. But what's the real yesh? The real yesh is yesh ha'amiti. The only true substance is God himself. That's the real yesh. And we said from yesh to yesh, go all the way down because it's already a yesh. And that's true here as well. So we're talking about yesh me yesh, not yesh me ayin. We're talking about yesh me yesh. The original yesh, yesh ha'amiti, is a yesh. It's a thing. It's a substance. It's actually the only thing that exists. The only substance is God, and there's no other substance but God. So the yesh of God can go all the way down to the lowest levels. Yesh me yesh. It's a very, very interesting and deep twist that the Rebbe is doing here. It's not like a clever play on words. The Rebbe is expressing a very, very, very deep truth in this very sharp, word expression. Because normally, yesh me yesh, yesh me ayin, yesh me yesh is like you have something in this world and it makes another something in this world not very relevant, not very high, nothing we're interested in. But yesh me ayin, ooh, that's from God to physicality, God to creation. Whoa, that's the real deal. And the Rebbe says, what Chassidus always says, the real deal is down here. The real deal isn't ma'av chachma b'tzilas. The real deal is down here. So down here is a yesh. And you know what can only create the yesh of down here? The yesh ha'amiti. Yesh me yesh. From the yesh ha'amiti, it can go all the way down to this of planet Earth. This of planet Earth comes from the yesh ha'amiti. Because ayin can't make a leather bookmark or anything else in this physical reality. It's too high, it's too spiritual, it's too lofty. But the yesh ha'amiti can, because it's yesh me yesh. Since it's a yesh itself, it goes all the way down to the yesh of our world. We have learned this concept in many different ways. Never exactly phrased this way, so it's like a very sharp, succinct, powerful way to express it. Remember in a previous mimer we did, the mimer we did before this one, where we went into this whole concept again and again and again, and that mimer was actually a Basilagani mimer, about how the point is here. Everything is here. It's in the earth. And the earth is the most important things because bottom line, the happening place is here, is planet Earth. This is the real deal. This is what's important. Everything else is godliness. This is the playing field. This is what matters. So in very different words, the Rebbe is bringing out the same thing. All spirituality is yesh me ayin, and ayin that creates a yesh, and then the yesh becomes an ayin to create another yesh, and then the yesh becomes an ayin to create another yesh, and that yesh becomes an ayin to create another yesh. From a higher spiritual dimension to a lower spiritual dimension, it can't go far down because it's spirituality. It's ayin. Ayin can't really descend. But when we're talking about the yesh ha'amiti, that goes all the way down. That comes here. And what does it have to do with what we're talking about? So just as the yesh ha'amiti is this only true existence, and therefore can come all the way down to the lowest existences, so too the mirror images of that yesh ha'amiti, the pshitas of the Ein Sof, the pshitas, the yechida of the neshama, the pshitas of Shabbos, they're all mirrors of this idea of real yesh. And that's why the Rebbe says the quality that the Yechida gives us, we see in every Jew. We said before, and we mentioned it earlier tonight, that what do we have from the Yechida, besides the ability to bring down the Pshitas of the Ein Sof, which is amazing, and being the Kadesh Shem Shemayim. We're adding Kedusha to the Shem Shemayim. Well, how are we adding Kedusha to Shem Shemayim? Oh, by Mr. Nefesh. We're Meiser Nefesh, we self-sacrifice, and this causes the Kadesh Shem Shemayim, and we bring Kedusha to the name of Hashem himself, which is insane. But we do it because we're unbelievable, because we have the Pshitas of the Yechida, the Pshitas of the Ein Sof itself. There's this, so who precisely can do those acts of Mesiras Nefesh? That's being the Kadesh Shem Shemayim and bringing Kedusha to Hashem's name himself, adding to Hashem's name, sanctifying Hashem's name, bringing sanctity to Hashem's name. Who can do this? Any Jew. Every Jew. The simplest Jew. Just like we were saying about Shabbos. Tzaddikim or holy people or learned people, wise people, godly people, spiritual people, religious people, they have no copyrights here. It doesn't make a difference. It's just a Jewish thing. Every Jew can be Meiser Nefesh for Hashem. And unfortunately, since the world has been washed in the blood of the Jews, since there's been way too many opportunities to be Meiser Nefesh and Kadesh Shem Shemayim, again and again and again and again in our very bloodied history, unfortunately, at some points, who were these people? Were these our greatest, our most illustrious, our most knowledgeable? Sometimes, 100%, many times. And many times, simplest Jew. Barely knew he was a Jew, had a Jewish name, knew he had a Jewish mother, did or didn't keep the mitzvahs, did or didn't know how to read Hebrew. He's a Jew. And he was Makadesh Shem Shemayim. And he was Meiser Nefesh. And he brought sanctity to God's name. So how is this possible? The Rebbe says, because it's yesh me yesh. If it's yesh me ayin, if you're talking about an ayin that's creating this yesh, so the ayin can't really go far down. It's not go all the way down. So only the higher levels would receive it, like from Keser Vatzilus to Ma of Chachma Vatzilus. That's it. Nothing else can receive it. Can't go further down. But when it's talking about yesh me yesh, when we're talking about the yesh ha'amiti as the source, it goes all the way down to any yesh you want. So the pshitas of the Yechida, like the yesh ha'amiti, a yesh, a metzias, a substance, that goes all the way down, which means every single Jew, whoever that Jew is, however far you have to go down to that Jew, every single Jew has the ability to be Meiser Nefesh. Every single Jew has the ability to be Kadesh Shem Shemayim, because it's not coming from an ayin to a yesh. It's coming from a yesh to a yesh. And since it's coming from the yesh, it could go to any yesh there is. It could go all the way down. So this is the enormous, enormous power that we all contain inside of us. This is how precious we all are. Now, of course, we don't want to die to sanctify God's name. But Mesiras Nefesh, as we explained in time, is a daily occurrence. We have countless opportunities to be Meiser Nefesh all day long. Every time we don't do what we want, because we're doing what Hashem wants. And the more it's hard for you to do what Hashem wants, the more opportunities you have to be Meiser Nefesh and Mekadesh Shem Shemayim. And if you're a mother and you're a wife, wow, you got even more opportunities to not do what you want, do what Hashem wants, like literally all day long. And we have this ability from the pshitas of the Yechida of our soul, that yesh element. It could come into us, however much a yesh we think we are, no problem. It could go all the way down to however low a yesh we are. And every one of us can be Meiser Nefesh. And especially on Shabbos. On Shabbos, we have special abilities because the pshitas of our self, of our soul, of our core, of our Yechida is enhanced and magnified and brought out by the pshitas of the time itself, the pshitas of the mitzvah. We're immersed in the pshitas of Shabbos. With this, the Rebbe is ready to conclude the mimer and answer his original questions. Any thoughts or questions? I know I just went straight. So we are. And any thoughts, any questions on any of this? Okay. So at this point, hopefully, this is the ideal. The ideal is start off with questions. You learn. And by the time you come to the end, the questions are so obvious, obviously. So the Rebbe says, now we understand why Yaakov, not Avraham, is bringing down this special Ufaratzta nachala bli meitzarim, limitless inheritance. If you remember, as we said, first of all, why in the world would Shabbos bring down something limitless? Shabbos is limited. Why would something limited bring down something limitless? And we said, and why is Yaakov so much greater in his Shmira Shabbos than like Abraham? Well, we also have an allusion and a reference that he kept Shabbos. So the Rebbe says we could see something very different. Now, again, this is not to knock down Abraham. This is to understand the concept. Obviously, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, they're all amazing. I could bring out how Abraham was the greatest. I could bring out how Yitzchak was the greatest. I could bring out how Yaakov was the greatest. And this isn't even talking about greatness. We're not measuring greatness here. We're talking about what we know about the Shmir Shabbos. That's what we're talking about. So this is not an up for Yaakov and a down for Abraham. It's just for us to understand the power of Shabbos. That's what we're getting to. So by Abraham, we don't see any allusion, reference in a verse to his specifically keeping Shabbos. We have Shmor Mishmarti, that he kept all the mitzvahs, which obviously you know was in the mitzvahs for Shabbos. Which means not that, he didn't keep Shabbos. He probably kept kosher. He probably didn't gossip too much. But I don't know if he kept Shabbos. Just maybe got lost in the shuffle of the 613. No, we are confident he kept Shabbos. And for that matter, we're confident Yitzchak kept Shabbos also. But because Shabbos is not explicitly separated from the other mitzvahs, he is keeping of Shabbos in a unique way. It means, as we understand it, that he kept Shabbos like he kept all the other mitzvahs, which isn't a bad thing at all. How did he keep the mitzvahs? As Avram Avinu, who was originally Avram Seichel Hanala Mikol Rayon, the incredible brilliance. We think Jews are smart. Well, we come from Avram, who brought the gift of monotheism to the entire world. The three, as we would call them, major religions all stem from him one way or another. So this is Avraham. So when Avram did any and every mitzvah, including Shabbos, he did it with intensity, with purpose, with understanding, with kavanah, with love, with fear, with intention, with a lot of spiritual energy. He did all mitzvahs that way, including Shabbos. What do we see about Yaakov keeping Shabbos? Well, we're told actually something very specific about Yaakov keeping Shabbos. Again, this is not written in the verse, but it's based on the verse when he came into the city of Shechem and he had to set up the Tumim, the Daled Amos, to keep the Tum Shabbos. The laws of how far you can go outside enclosed or settled area on Shabbos. Like if you need to go on the outskirts of the city, how far can you go, and things you do to extend how far you can go. Okay, so why is that? Wow. It says because by Abraham, how we're understanding his Shabbos was this intense spiritual experience. By Yaakov, how we're understanding the Shabbos is he was careful not to transgress the lo saseh and incorporated Daled Amos. And there says that's all the difference. That's the point. Because we're not looking at Shabbos as she is like every other mitzvah. Of course, there is commonality of Shabbos in every other mitzvah. And we are not knocking how Avram kept Shabbos like halavai, add another million halavais. That's not our point. But the uniqueness of Shabbos, we don't see as it's explicit in the drash on the verse in terms of Abraham, which doesn't mean he didn't do it, but means that wasn't noted. So that wasn't the forte. But by Yaakov, what we see explicit in the midrash on the verse is him coming to the city before Shabbos and setting up the Tchum and being careful, and Shabbos specifically, and not to do the lo saseh and Daled Amos. So what do we see from that? The Rebbe says we see a getting into the core shitas of Shabbos, meaning, as the Rebbe was explaining it, within Shabbos we have two broad components, Zachar and Shamar. Zachar is all the things we do to bring sanctity to Shabbos, like Kiddush and Havdalah and the davening and the Kriya, all the Zechira of Shabbos, the special foods, the special clothing, the ways we add godliness and enhance the Shabbos. And that is like what Avram was doing. He was being very spiritual and very holy, and I'm sure his Shabbos was like, wow, you could be a little, put on a wall and observe his Shabbos, like, wow, that 5 minutes of his Shabbos could inspire you, I'm sure, for the rest of your lifetime of keeping Shabbos. Such holiness, such sanctity. But the Rebbe says that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about holiness, we're not talking about sanctity. We're talking talking about the pshitas of Shabbos. Where do we see the pshitas of Shabbos most? In the los aseis. Because again, the pshitas of Shabbos means like that place where it's most commonality, where it's the same, because it's pshitas. So me not moving muktzah on Shabbos and Yaakov Avinu not moving muktzah on Shabbos, so to speak. Oh, there's the commonality. That's in the los aseis. So by Yaakov, we see Shabbos mefurash, Shabbos not as part of all the mitzvahs, but separate, because we're showing here something distinguished and distinct and different about Shabbos. That's a point. And we're seeing Shabbos keeping the los aseis. Again, that doesn't mean that Yaakov didn't keep the los aseis. I'm sorry, Avram didn't keep the los aseis. But it means that's not what the verse is telling us. So that wasn't the shining quality we're knowing about him, though I'm sure he kept the los aseis perfectly also. But by Yaakov, that's what the Midrash is telling us, that he was careful with the los aseis, with the point that more expresses the pshitas of Shabbos, and specifically the example of the halacha of the los asei that we're bringing out has to do with Daled Amos, which we already learned in this mimer, is the halacha that expresses pshitas in a halacha, right? We got pshitas by the Eibishter, pshitas by Tzom, we got pshitas by the Jew, pshitas of the Yechida, we got pshitas in a halacha, Daled Amos, and we got pshitas in a mitzvah. So Yaakov, where Shabbos is distinguished and separate by him, where Shabbos is the los aseis, and within the los aseis it comes into Daled Amos. All of this shows that what the verse wants us to know about Yaakov Shabbos is its pshitos, not meaning Avram didn't attain that, but that's not what we're being told. That's not what's for us. For him, for sure, but for us, we see it actually uniquely in Yaakov. Because we're not looking like Abraham, Shabbos is all the mitzvahs. No, we won't look at Shabbos as different than all the mitzvahs. We're not looking like Abraham investing all this Kedusha and sanctity. We're not talking about Kedusha and sanctity, because Kedusha and sanctity, there's differentiations. We want the commonality. That's the pshitos. And that we see as explicit in the Midrash about Yaakov. And that's why Yaakov Shmir Shabbos gives us with this nachala bli mitzarim, with this limitless nachala ufaratza, yama, v'kema, tzafona, v'negba, a limitless spreading forth, as we will very soon see. We're going to get all 10 lands, and I have this beautiful little Tzfas style magazine that came out like in 1990s, and I still have the pages, though they're very flaky now, but you know, they're so old and could fall apart. But they show their one article was, what are those 3 other areas that we're going to get to go from 7 to 10? And it's these vast stretches of like the Middle East, vast lands, enormous. Nachla b'li mitzarim, this limitless expanse. Why is Shabbos drawing down this limitless expanse? Because Shabbos is pshitas. And when it's pshitas, there's no limits. So why is Yaakov's Shabbos drawing this down and not anyone else's, like, for example, Avram's? Because Yaakov, we see in him the pshitas of Shabbos. And why is Shabbos bechlal, Shabbos, which is so limited, it's time-bound, it's from this time to this time, coming from 6 days of work. Why is that drawing down limitless? Because we're not talking about those details of halacha creating the limitlessness. We're talking about the core Shabbos mitzvah energy, which is pshitas. And pshitas has no barriers. Just like the pshitas of the Ein Sof can come down to the pshitas of a Yid. Who am I to draw down the pshitas of the Ein Sof? I'm a nobody, I'm a nothing. True, correct, absolutely. Got nothing to do with that. But the pshitas comes down in a limitless fashion. So the pshitas of Shabbos draws down the limitless nachala in a limitless fashion. Then concludes by saying, in this pshitas, going to the pshitas of Shabbos, bringing down pshitas of the Ein Sof, bringing down this nachal of pshitas, is expressed in ufaratza. Because ufaratza, is like the pirates, right? Pirates. The pirates, the one who breaks through, bursts through boundaries. Parrots, because he's the pirates, is Mashiach. So through the limitlessness of the pshitas of Shabbos, the limitlessness of the ufaratza, it brings us to the limitlessness of, from ufaratza to the pirates of that ufaratza, Melech HaMashiach himself. And that is how the mimer concludes. And I thought what was special in this mimer, obviously there's a lot of like really great ideas. Like, every class, there was like such a cool, fascinating, I thought, idea. I also really loved a piece that was obviously thematic throughout the mimer. We kept going back to it, which was the specialness of every single Jew, how we are the special ones, how every Jew is a special one. So it doesn't make a difference who you are. You're a Jew. You have this special quality to pull down all these high spiritual levels that you don't understand. But it's okay. You're pulling them down because you're a Jew. But I also thought this mimer was special because it's highlighting a mitzvah. Like a lot of times when you learn a mimer and it's like, okay, as we discussed at our Farbrengen, the mimer is an immersion in God thought, and that shifts us and changes us and puts us, in a God space like nothing else. So it doesn't need to have any practical expressions. That's fine. But here you have a mimer, which is very much a mimer and a deep mimer and a long mimer, a very deep immersion in God thought. But I also felt there was a very practical way we could be inspired by this mimer to really appreciate and focus on our Shmira Shabbos. As I was saying at the end, that specifically in the low sases of Shabbos, we're not talking about, we normally think we're going to add in Shabbos, we're going to make an extra kobo, we're going to make sure the house is cleaner and there's a beautiful white clean tablecloth and we're wearing Shabbos clothes. That's all good and we should do all that. But they were saying in the Zehiras, in the low sases of Shabbos, and being careful. There's a lot of laws of Shabbos and a lot of low sases of Shabbos. But within that, finding the pshitas of Shabbos, because that's commonality. That's pashut. Pashut meaning it's for all the same. Now, as the Rebbe said, every aspect of Shabbos is for all the same, and Tainug in Shabbos is for all the same, and Menucha in Shabbos is for all the same. So if you take away from here to make better food on Shabbos, and that's you're connecting to the pshitas and the limitless, that's fine too, and everybody's very happy you came to the class. All your kids at least. But I'm saying specifically, the Rebbe is highlighting how in the low sases of Shabbos, we can grasp this pshitus and open up this nachal bli meitzarim, this limitless expression. Even on a very simple level, to do what I've done several weeks into the mimer, which is I put a marker in my siddur on that page of Mincha Shabbos. I can't rely on my spacey brain, foggy brain to remember, but if I have a marker there, I generally remember. And even just like pausing before you say, everything that's mimer goes back to that paragraph. And just like pausing and thinking, and then saying that paragraph with a little drop of focus is such a practical takeaway, a practical b'chein from this very spiritual mimer, but very grounded. Taste it in your Shabbos. Taste it in your Mincha Shmona Esrei on Shabbat. Taste it in how you look at yourself. Taste it in how you look at other Jews in your lives. Very, from so up, like the Rebbe said, from yesh to yesh. From so high, it comes all the way down. And that was the mimer.